our nation is most behind, although our technical capability and capacity is better than our adversaries. When we develop lines of operation, if you read the first one, I look at that as dynamic network operations and dynamic network defense, and no, we cannot do that today. In the middle is sort of network exploitation, and the bottom one is the development of non-kinetic effects, and I call them target folders in support of regional combatant commanders, O plans and con plans. And then I tried to figure out how to get at the problem. So I did what I call an assessment of the current condition, and that was a travel we took globally, trying to define the battle space, and I do call it a battle space, is very difficult. I would tell you that we do network defense in what I call a gripechit mentality, and the general will understand this. When a Navy airplane lands on an aircraft carrier, the pilot fills out a gripechit and gives it to the crew chief to fix the airplane before the next go. And that's how we do cyber defense today. It's totally reactive. And we can't live in that environment anymore, and we've got to get to be dynamic, I'd tell you then proactive, and then predictive. If you look at commercial industry, and I have a chart I'll talk to you in a little bit about, they are predictive, and if they weren't, they'd go out of business. And then we need to define normal. If I go to one of the Navy computer telecommunication master stations and I get them to bring me up the right view screen on what capacity is in our networks, and I don't care whether it's in megabytes, terabytes, or whatever kind of bytes, but what's the current level of activity as opposed to capacity, and they show it to me and everybody's real happy, and then I go, what's it supposed to look like? Nobody can tell you. And then if I ask, should it be different at 8 o'clock in the morning Eastern time as opposed to noon, as opposed to midnight? Nobody can tell you. So if you can't define normal, you can't define deviations. And if you don't understand the deviations, you can't be proactive. And so normal's a fun challenge. As I went around the globe, the things I looked at were the global domain and C2 relationships. And what's going to be the relationship between U.S. Stratcom and U.S. Cybercom and the regional combatant commanders? And then how are we going to work con plan and O plan support, and what needs to be done from a regional basis and what needs to be done globally? The next bullet's something I lifted from Admiral Willard, and I didn't do it because he's a Navy 4-star. It's something I totally believe in. We run C2 at the operational level of war across the SIPRNet, and it's on the same transport as the unclassified. And there are multiple ways you can take down the unclassified infrastructure backbone. And if you take that down and you can't C2 at the operational level of war, then we've taken our technical advantage away that we've given to our pilots, our airmen, seamen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen. We have put a lot of money into capability and capacity to go beyond visual range and be able to attack targets. We have put a lot of money in to be able to go 1v many kinetically. And if you take away the ability to C2 at the operational level of war, you start in the merge. So you start at a World War I dogfight, 1v1, and we don't have the capacity in the United States military to go to somebody else's backyard and fight and win in a 1v1 relationship. And so if you can't maintain your C2, you don't have anything. Definition of the battle space, you'll see that routinely throughout my talking points. Standards and assessments. What are the standards for network operations and network defense, and who's going to assess and correct problems that are found? And I tell you right now, DISA, Defense Information Systems Agency, does it through JTF Global Network Operations. I think this is a service responsibility, and I think if you go talk to Lieutenant General Carol Pollitt, the head of DISA, he'll tell you the same thing, but the services have not done this. And I've taken it in my charter to establish something like the Nuclear Propulsion Examining Board to go out and assess our afloat and ashore commands, and do they adhere to the standards we've set. And if they don't, what actions do you take? And I'll just let you ponder that. Okay, you got a carrier involved in combat operations in CENTCOM's AO, and you find out his whole network's contaminated. Do you unplug him from the gig? That's a pretty serious decision that somebody's got to make. And then I tell you, we need to refine unity of effort, unity of funding. The processes in cyber are dynamic, they're not static, so you never get to the 100% solution. And I tell you right now, our training is not operationally focused. It's more a collection for collection's sake. And so what did I think we have to do? The challenge is to position the Navy to lead in dynamic cyber operations and to build the capability and capacity to function as a force multiplier. The network's not viewed as a combat system. There's no composite situational awareness. You cannot go into an ops center in any of the services anywhere globally and understand what the current operating picture works like in a dynamic near real-time situation. There's limited tool sets for operations, and I talked about static versus dynamic and proactive. And I will tell you the continued sole source reliance on kinetics will put us on the wrong side of the economic curve, and we don't have enough money to build kinetic counters for everything the adversary can build. And the example I'll give you is if you look at Chinese ballistic missiles, and you think one of those cost about $2 million to build, and then what do we shoot them down with in the Navy? Well, we shoot them down with SM-3 Block something or others, and on a good day, one of those costs $8.5 million. You can't win in that environment, so you have to get to the left side of the kill chain. The decision space, it's how do we achieve dynamic operations in defense and operations? How do we use exploits, and then how do we do attack? So this is how I defined dynamic cyber operations. Again, defined and promulgated standards, assessment and follow-up, get through the supporting relationships with the different COCOMs. And when we do a major operation, do you send a joint cyber operation task force to support a regional operational commander, combatant commander? Situational awareness I'll get to in a minute. Authorities I've talked to, Title 10, Title 14, and Title 50, as well as Title 18 and how we work through that. And then once you develop the picture, if all the people in my watch center are Title 50 people, and I want to share this with my Title 10 numbered fleet brethren, how do I get the authority to do that? So how do you strip away the sources and get it to just what the operational commander wants? We do it in air defense, we do it in anti-submarine warfare, and we do it in surface warfare. We've got to figure out how to do it in this domain. And then you've got to be able to operate in real time. And this is sort of how I get to it. Okay, I'm the Navy guy, so I do it with Navy things. And so here's the infrastructure I'm trying to defend. And there I got some adversaries coming in, and I'm an Aegis guy, so I know how to define it from an air defense perspective. And so that's why I picked this, because I'm not pedigreed in computers. I need the lieutenant commander to turn my computer on in the morning, and when it hangs up, I need him to come sort it out. I don't know how to do it. Okay, so there's an adversary. Okay, here's the global information grid that's run by a commercial consortium. We do not have the money or the people to know everything that's going on inside of that. So how do you get at that piece of the picture, and what partnerships do you have to develop with industry to help you with that? And so I call that the surveillance area. The next area I talk about is the DISA grid, or the DISN. Okay, we control that. It's leased on commercial backbone, but it's ours. And so we ought to have a very good idea what's going on in there. We ought to have track of things that happen, and we ought to marry them up with track radars or early warning aircraft if you put it in an air defense vernacular. Okay, and we have some sensors that live on that interface, and they can tell us what's going on, what's coming in, and what's going out, and how do we display that. And then we've got the inner area that I'll call the vital area. And if somebody gets in there, you ought to have an aircraft in trail, or you ought to have a fire control solution on it from a missile ship. And in the Navy, that vital area encompasses 3 networks: NMCI, OneNet, and IT21. And so we've built our own challenges before we ever worry about the rings outside. And then we've got sensors on there that we need to figure out how to monitor and display. That are there. That just sort of points out what the picture looks like. So how do you put all this in one op center, along with a picture of the commercial grid that'll provide so much information to your operators that you need tactical decision aids to tell you what's important and what deviates from normal. So that's how I define the battle space. Here's a good picture of why normal is important. And I won't tell you what person I stole this from, but it's a large domestic internet service provider that does both internet and telephones. And this happens to be a telephony picture because it's the best one that I had to depict deviation from normal. And it's hard to see. That's the kind of picture that we need in the military departments to be able to deal in this environment. And that's why normal is important. Okay, so here's what I promised my service boss I'd do, and I told him I'd get to it by the summer. And I won't read it to you, but then I told him about 3 weeks ago I was sure glad it stayed warm in Washington through Halloween. Because I don't think I can do it by the summer. It's going to be a long-term fight. My command's only about half stood up, so that means I've got about 80 people. And we're trying to do exercises out in PACOM with our other service brethren, and it's a tough sled. But this is where we are, and this is where we're headed. And I know there'll be a question period, so I look forward to your questions. Thank you.